We can probably just start here if you want. It'd be fun. We can
Yeah.
jump into it. You want to do that? This will be a nice organic conversation as we're getting in. Well, and one of the things too, like what I found, I'm curious from your perspective on this. There is a spot I really do want to start. I want to get to in a second, but this is actually a really good point because, like, I think people jump too quick at times, and then they're really stuck where they have to go back and grind maybe with a job they don't want or something 6 months later instead of having a little plan. Have you seen that a lot? Maybe it's your own journey or somewhere else.
Oh, absolutely. Right. I mean, it's one of those things to where, listen, I have been in a constant state of side hustles my entire life, right? I've always loved like something that's creative, and I've found that it actually helps me if I have a full time job to learn based off of what I'm doing for my side hustle, right? And actually, that's helped me out for a lot of times with my full time job. But I mean, you're right. Like it's if you're in a situation where you want to jump, I tell most people, I'm like, well, first of all, you better make sure you've got about 4 months of runway saved up,
Mhm.
and then some, right? Because you're going to stumble a little bit. And then, some proof of concept, right? I mean, I love when I talk to entrepreneurs and they're like, oh, yeah, I've got this idea. And then they quit their job without actually checking the boxes of, all right, do I have customers? Has anyone bought it? Has anyone purchased it? Has anyone invested in it? And if the answer is no, then you're not ready, right? You got to basically launch these things and show some sort of proof of concept and have some revenue stream coming in before it's time to take the leap. I don't
Yeah.
understand that. And again, maybe that's why I haven't been on the rocket ship of entrepreneurship. Maybe I haven't been all in, and maybe that's the missing piece for me. But I've just never been in a situation where I'm like, I got this idea that I'm just going to 1000% cut off all of my financial stability and go into.
Yeah. Well, and there's a great book I'd recommend everyone called "When to Jump" by Mike Lewis. Especially anyone in that kind of side hustle. Maybe I want to do this full time. How do I, go and putting a plan together? But to your point, one of the other things that, and this comes up a lot in the podcast, I think a lot of folks miss is they're spending a few hours a week, let's say, trying to like, oh, I have this idea. Remembering that when they quit a job, they're now going to have 40, 50 hours. Instead of saying, all right, let's say I'm working 35, 40 hours a week at a full-time job. Well, why don't you try to do 20 extra hours, 25 extra hours, really push yourself to the max. And then when you feel like, oh my God, I'm squeezed so tight, then it's a little bit more justified. Because I find folks, yeah, anyone can work on something 1 to 2 hours a week. What happens when you have 10 or 15 or 20 hours? What are you going to do with that time?
Absolutely. And it's one of those things too, I think, and I've done it twice, right? Where I have left and gone into a full-time entrepreneurial opportunity. And the one gauge that I had was I found that if I what it was almost like an opportunity loss, right? It was like all of a sudden I started looking at my time as like the opportunity for me to build over here is greater than my time to build for someone else here. Right. And it was like one of those again, but it's a proof of concept. If I've got the revenue, I've got the clients, and I've got some sort of revenue that's already built in, and then I can see it exponentially grow based on the amount of time I put into it, then that was like the stepping off point. I'm like, okay, now I'm losing opportunity by staying put.
Yeah, that's right. Well, and you mentioned it earlier. I think having that runway, and it depends on the risk tolerance, right? Some people would prefer 1 to 2 year, right? For me, I'm like, I need to have 2 years in the hopper so I could take the big jump and a big swing of the bat so that you can build because it might take 6 or 8 or 10 or 12. Who knows,
So
right? It
not
might
not
take
not not 3 months, like I said.
no. Well, I'm not saying, but yeah, but I think to your point though, if you have some clients, I think the only thing I would argue on in the 4 months is like to your point, if you have no clients, if you haven't justified it, but yeah, if you have clients and you're working, I think 4 months is fine. Because if you have revenue coming
Yep.
in, and this is another thing, it's like going into under. I just did this very recently. It's like, what's your monthly expenses? A lot of folks can't, if I ask them directly, they wouldn't be able to know like how much they kind of spend per month. It's amazing. So like knowing that to a T, I think is really valuable as well.
You know what's crazy? I think it was a lot easier to know what your monthly nut was before all the automated monthly recurring billings happened.
Yeah.
right? As
True.
soon as the phone came into play and all of a sudden it was like, yeah, you can bill me monthly for that SaaS or for this technology or for this subscription. All of a sudden, I don't think anyone knows,
Yeah.
right? Because all of a sudden you get these little dings of $10 here, $20 here, maybe $100. And then it's like, wait, where did that even go to?
Yeah, I had to do an audit of that, and I mean, it was eye opening in a sense. I mean, I think maybe I'm more onto that than maybe most people are. I'm also kind of a minimalist, so I try not to have too much crap like that. But yeah, I think that's right. If you just all of a sudden a $10 charge here, $20 charge there, that adds up over time. So I agree.
When especially like I've found that as an entrepreneur, a side hustler, that you find yourself in these situations where you're like, oh, this is a great AI tool, or hey, this is a great creator tool, or this is great. And all of a sudden you're in these subscription loops that
Mhm.
you kind of either you use it and you know you're using it, or you use it maybe once or twice and then you forget about it. And all of a sudden it starts hitting that credit card on the monthly and you just don't even realize.
Yeah. And I think it's good to audit. I mean, it's funny we're having this conversation. I was just emailing back and forth someone that's going to be on the podcast upcoming, and they're using that new, like Google rolled out some new calendaring feature, or not calendaring, like scheduling features, where I don't know if it's exactly like Calendly, but it sort of seems like it has some of the functionality. And I even asked them back, I'm like, hey, how do you like that? Have how does it compare to Calendly? And because like I've been paying for Calendly for a couple of years,
Yeah,
but I pay for Google Workspace. So if I could use that tool and similar, like I think that's one of those things. You don't need all the tools if it gets me enough. If it gets me 80% there. Okay. I'm
exactly.
game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You'd
I
be
think,
willing to change.
yeah, for sure. Well, God, we can go down this rabbit hole. I won't get us too far off the line, but I wanted to start. I wanted to go back because I know we just jumped into this. Here's what I'm intrigued about, because being the Just Get Started podcast, like, it's all these kind of jump off points, these inflection points. So tell me more about this long summer road trip traveling the California coast. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. It was funny. That really, I wouldn't say struck a nerve, but it definitely like increased the amount of people that reached out to me significantly because I think a lot of people are really struggling with happiness in their job and
Mhm.
what's really fulfilling for them. And that was a time in my life where I was working for a major corporation in San Diego. I was making more than I'd ever made before in my life. I had two young kids at home. My wife's a school teacher. By no means do I have a nest egg. But I kept seeing myself come home extremely uh, anxiety riddled, short tempered, tired. And I wasn't being the dad or the husband I needed to be. And, at that point, I remember like just really breaking down. I'm like, I got to get out of this cycle. And it was on a road trip that we took. My kids were, I want to say 4 and 6 at the time. They're now um, my daughter's 16 yesterday and 14.
Wow.
So they're getting older, but this was a long time ago. But it was one of those things where I knew like there was a very short window of time, the next 10 years, that I could truly impact my kids' lives by being present, by coaching, by being able to pick them up at school, being able to go on field trips. And to do that, I needed time, right? And time really for me was more valuable than revenue. I definitely ended up making revenue and doing really well for myself when I bet on myself, but my goal was time. It wasn't I need to go buy a second home in Tahoe or I need to go on this major vacation. I just wanted to be present, and I would have done anything, and I did do anything to make sure I was present for them during those foundational years of growing up.
Yeah. Tell me about the next steps, because I think a lot of folks go through that. And then on Monday, they're back in the grind. They had the epiphany, and then they're back in the grind. And 5 years go by, and they're like, "Ah, shit!" Like, how did you take some action on it?
Yeah, so I planned, right? I didn't just wake up on Monday and be like, I'm tired of this, I'm done. I mean, it was a true like 6 month process of okay, I know this is happening, I feel it, and I need to like just draw a line in the sand and say, here is my date that I need to leave. And that date so happened to be right after I got my bonus.
Yeah.
But it just kind of gave me, I need to get to this mark and then what am I going to do next, right? And what I did next was not successful, right? What I did next was something I thought I'd be good at, and it was running an after kids PE program for schools, and it was a franchise, and I did great for selling into the schools. I just didn't realize the impact of managing 18 and 19-year-olds to show up and actually teach a cheerleading class or a football class or whatever it was. They just didn't show up. And so it was very unscalable. And at the time, I was working a lot with a friend of mine who was, I'll say, an Amazon expert. And we basically pivoted into becoming Amazon consultants. And then I went everything on the kids, you know, PE franchise model was out the door, ushered in Amazon. And then that led to other opportunities where I was consulting for a direct consumer wine business, and just opportunities started to present themselves based on the hustle that I was putting out into the universe, put it that way. Not to sound too wacky, but it's like once you
Yeah.
kind of get out of the 9 to 5 and you start experiencing different opportunities and grabbing lunch and coffees and meeting people, I think people will be surprised at the opportunities that open up if you're able to see those opportunities and take advantage of them in a good way.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to what we were talking before we started recording about the networking aspect. You had mentioned, obviously when you move to a new place and you kind of lose some of that. But I think now in the virtual world, now I love meeting up for people with coffee in person, but even a virtual coffee, you meet people that you just never would have expected. And I think more than anything, people are open to that where you can send them a note. I mean, we connect on LinkedIn, like one or two times on like a comment. And I'm like, dude, this guy's kind of cool. Let me have it on the podcast. Like, I don't mind asking people, where before I used to be so scared of like, well, what do they think? Maybe, are they going to be upset? Like, I don't know why I would think that, but you know what I'm saying? So I think people are open to that, right?
1000%. I mean, LinkedIn it is the unlock for networking globally. I mean, if you want it that way. I mean, for me, like I really live in the sausage factory of LinkedIn, which is DMs and comments, right? I mean, I've always looked at like, you get a good post, it really is an excuse to have a conversation, right? All you're doing is given a topic to actually start talking. And that's where I found a lot of the connections, and actually like true connections I've made over the last year have come from comments and talking to people on LinkedIn behind the scenes, right? And the DMs, and really kind of getting to know who they are, what they're doing, and offering support, and no ask, right? It's like, all right, great. Hey, I love what you're doing with this project. How can I help? And just either giving free advice or make a connection or anything you can do to help them out has been the biggest ROI I can nail down right now.
Hmm. I want to go back to that. I want to kind of put a pin in it for a second, because I want to make sure we don't lose the track that we are on, because I think you said something that was really valuable, and it seems like, tell me if I'm wrong in this. Have you ever struggled with identity? And the reason I ask is I feel I did for a lot of years. Of like, I was a golf professional, was my first career. And I was so enthralled with the golf business that trying to leave that, I was like, that's what I identified as. But, and what I'm starting to find more, maybe you found this, is when you start skipping around, trying things, meeting people, like you almost lose that identity of like, oh, I have to only do this, right? Those 9 to 5ers, that's where people get stuck. Do you find that you have identity, or did you struggle with that?
I feel like I did. Yeah. But I kind of looked at it as identity as more of like a little more fluid, right? I mean, and I think maybe that comes with age, or maybe that comes with having stepped out of the compartmentalized 9 to 5 and actually living on my own, and kind of eating what I kill out into the corporate world, right? It just kind of gives you a new look on how revenue is made and who you are as a person, right? My identity is shifted based on the businesses I've been in, right? They've all been various businesses, whether it's, after school kids program, a wine club, Amazon consulting, sports marketing. But what I felt like it always been consistent, which is I'm really good at business development, which means connections and
Mhm.
developing conversations and understanding patterns and how those patterns can basically create opportunities for everyone. And that's
Mm.
where I've always kind of found my niche. And even like with Discomfort right now, like I don't touch the shoes. I don't create the videos. I don't manage the LinkedIn ad management. I'm the person that's basically doing the talking and telling the stories to the people that need Discomfort custom sneakers.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and I think knowing that role too, because you can't do everything. I mean, I guess you could do everything. Wouldn't it be productive? It's like, how do you pick that lane and really focus? And that's ultimately where, let people do what they're great at.
Absolutely. Right. And it's also, could I learn some of that stuff?
Yeah.
Maybe. How much time would I lose actually trying it? Probably a lot. And would I actually be better than the person I'm partnering with? Never. Right. It's like
Yeah.
I know my strengths and I might know my weaknesses. And I think that's been my aha moment, is just being comfortable with my limitations and also my strengths as a business professional.
Yeah. How going back to and it might have been LinkedIn, I'm not sure, but like how did you meet Caleb, the co-founder there with Discomfort?
I bought some shoes from him.
Oh, okay.
It's simple as that. I had gone down this custom sneaker journey with a couple friends of mine who had a very nice financial win, and I wanted to get them something a little bit more than a Starbucks card or something that's just like, hey, attaboy. And so ended up finding a shoe designer who custom created a couple of shoes for me. I flew out to see my friends, presented the shoes, and filmed the whole thing. And the video was insane. Like, people loved it. It was a really cool kind of out of the box shoe creation video. And when I left, I'm like, that was interesting, right? That was interesting how people reacted to that on LinkedIn. And I'm like, you know what? I want a pair. And so I basically found Caleb through Instagram and TikTok and kind of weeding through this rabbit hole of custom shoemakers, custom shoe designers. And then we found each other. I went back and forth on a process with him, and he basically presented the money makers. They're right up there. You can't see them, but I kind of gave him an idea of what I wanted, which was something that was neutral. It said money maker because I was in the financial, recovery market. A couple of different things, and they all basically led to this one shoe design. And what he did different was he basically gave me the custom shoe making video, him actually making the shoe. And I
Mm.
posted that on LinkedIn and put some music behind it. And I think it went off for maybe like 36 hours of views. And I'm like, whoa, that's
Wow.
crazy. And so Caleb and I started talking. I asked him how his business is currently, and he was very, very well known within kind of the sneakerhead community, right? So Instagram, TikTok, and a lot of just one-off shoes were being purchased. And my idea was to bring this into businesses, right? And basically create custom shoes for commercial real estate brokers, for financial advisors, for insurance companies, for companies that are starving to stand out on LinkedIn and on social. Now we're giving them an excuse to explode their logo into sneaker form and create a series of videos that are highly sticky and that have an opportunity to go viral for them like nothing else before they've had. And that really is kind of the secret behind what Discomfort is. If anyone looks at Discomfort, they're like, oh, they make custom sneakers. Eh, we make sticky videos. That's what I'm into, is how do we basically help brands stop the scroll to their prospects or their clients and create those memorable moments where the logos come into life, someone opens the box and sees the shoes for the first time, they're gifted, they're being used for a trade show. The number of different ways they're being used, it's just a really fun way of looking at corporate gifting in a different way.
I mean, the shoes is like the gateway drug to get you in, right? Is that kind of like, right? Get to, and then it's like, well, yeah, but we also do all these other, programs, if you will, to help you grow your business.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the key is everyone loves the shoes, right? So we
Right.
start with the sneakers. We do free mock-ups. So we'll basically bring your design to life. You'll get to see it. And then once we say go, then we'll start working with your team on how to plant the field for LinkedIn. It's like, okay, hey, we've got our shoe. It's going to be arriving in 45 days. Here's what you need to do on LinkedIn to get yourself ready. Follow your ICP, engage with your ICP, understand what they're doing, who are the top 30 companies you want to work with, who are the 5 people within those companies you want to engage with, and start engaging. and start posting and start communicating with those guys. So as soon as you get those sneakers and you hit that post, guess where it's going to go to? It's going to go to their feed, right? And it's going to create that conversation where they're going to see your brand and you in a different viewpoint that's unique, and it's going to stop their scroll. Now from there, our part of our car wash is the sneakers, it's the video assets. And then once one of those videos goes viral, then we're able to come back in and help you with LinkedIn ad management. So that becomes your first ad. If you're not doing LinkedIn ads, that becomes your first ad. We set up A/B testing, we set up your landing pages, and we basically create a longer tail for that video to continue its top of the funnel business for you.
I just love the serendipity of it all. Like if you don't get those shoes as the gift for your, those folks initially, like, would you even get close to coming down this rabbit hole? Like, did you have a thought before this? Like, I really want to I think I can help people build on LinkedIn and do this stuff, but I need kind of something else. Like, I'm curious how the ideation process worked.
This is a great question because it goes back to really not knowing the end result once you get in, right? As an entrepreneur or a side hustler, like you're always going to continue to pivot to finally find your path. When I first got into this, I just liked the idea of a great corporate gift that would make someone's day. And it was a really cool, fun side hustle. When I started seeing the video assets and how that impacted the business side of things, I'm like, oh, okay, there's something here from a video asset standpoint. So I started with a sneaker, then went to the videos. And then I'm like, well, wait, how am I going to, from a business standpoint, create recurring revenue? Instead of I'm chasing 10 sneakers here, 50 sneakers here, that is not a long-term strategy for a business. Mm-hmm. We had to increase our revenue, which is the video package. And then it came down to, okay, how do we increase recurring revenue, which is LinkedIn ad management, where you can basically get into a retainer type of setting. So it really started with one-off purchase, increased purchase, and then it went to retainer. So it's just constantly trying to figure out how to scale and develop a business that was going to have recurring revenue instead of just one-off purchases.
What, because now has it only been like 6 months, right? This is still very new, right?
Yeah, well, the business itself, Discomfort's been around for, Caleb started this business about 6 years ago, maybe 7 years ago. And he started off designing wrestling shoes. So he was a wrestler in high school and in college, and basically started adding customization to wrestling shoes. And that quickly sped into custom sneakers. So it's been around for a while. The business aspect of it on LinkedIn and creating the videos for business is fresh. That's 6 months, 4 months old.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious. The reason I asked that is like, you have obviously several clients you've worked with now. Like, I'm curious, like a fun win story, like maybe the first client or two. Like, is there any unique things that you can remember of them coming in and using that, part of the business besides just the shoes?
So it goes back to network, right? And that's, we talked about network earlier. I think in any of these, going back to, just get started, it's like, your network is going to help you get through the initial launch. Right. And it's funny, like within my network, I've got people that were corporate employees for their entire life. And I've had people that have kind of stepped out on the entrepreneurial journey. The folks in the entrepreneurial journey step up and they help out tremendously, from purchasing to paying retail to everything they can to make sure you're going to be successful. Where some of the people that I know would be a massive win for me if they could actually get me to the right person or make that purchase, they just don't do it, right? Because they've been stuck in that 9-to-5 corporate box and they don't know what's needed to be done to actually get out of the entrepreneurial startup and into a sustainable business model. So network was number one, right? Actually leaning on my first person network around San Diego locally. And that's really kind of where it started, was working with people locally that believed in me and knew I would produce something that was of value and could help them out. After that, when I actually started leveraging their videos on LinkedIn, was when really LinkedIn became apparent to me how strong it could be to support others, right? And the outpouring of support and interest for Discomfort really blew me away. And so now, literally every time I post, we don't even spend ads right now. I'm just posting organically. And every time I post, I typically get 1 to 2 orders that come in based on an organic post that I'm putting together about custom sneakers and basically just posting a video.
Hmm. Oh, yeah. That's, I mean, but that's, it didn't, just to confirm, that didn't happen overnight. Like this has been you invest your time
Oh, yeah.
into the platform, right? Because I think some folks are, you even see, I mean, I see it now the more that I've been active on LinkedIn, is like a lot of the old way of posting. Like I'll see some folks like, hey, our company's at this event, or, oh, we have a new product. And I'm like, that's the only thing they're posting is about like them, about their company, they're not making it fun, engaging. They're not teaching people. Like there's a lot of different avenues to use LinkedIn, but you've been doing that for a while. I may look back at a lot of your posts. Like you've obviously been doing this for a while. This is not the first time around the block.
No, it's been a while. And there's a strategy to it, right? I mean, it's not just post about me, or gimme. It's, you have to, you have to educate, you have to entertain, and you have to relate, right? Those are really the three key aspects for success on LinkedIn. And basically, education's got to lead. You got to be able to help people out. You got to be able to give them the fundamentals of how you got to where you are, and don't talk
Mhm.
about where you are. Talk about how you got there, right? And basically, providing people a path or some sort of education of that is key. Entertainment, like if you can, again, for us with Discomfort, it's stopping the scroll. Like anything from an entertainment value that allows them to be different and stop the scroll and gain attention is key. And then the relatability, right? I mean, how have you struggled? How have you triumphed? How have you, overcome obstacles? Those types of relatable conversations are what people really lean into from a human standpoint on LinkedIn. But yeah, it wasn't overnight. And it continues, this platform continues to change almost on the weekly,
Yeah.
as far as like what people react to, what gets saturated, and then what's new.
Do you have a feeling, or I mean, it's hard to, because the algorithm and all that stuff, but more of a feeling of like why certain people, why certain things grow or audiences grow and certain people just kind of don't have any traction? Is there a kind of a clear 1 or 2 reasons?
I will tell you from my personal growth, and I started off, and I wasn't doing this back in March of last year, and I had about 2,000 followers on LinkedIn. Now I'm up to over 9,000. I'll probably get to 10,000 by probably February 1st. And what I've found is you have to support the community. You have to comment. You have to give some sort of opportunity to help people out, and people respond. In addition to that, you've got to find people that are active on the platform, right? I see so many people, and even I was guilty of that when I first started. I'm like, oh, this is a person in San Diego that I want to connect with because they are a VP of marketing at Starkist, right? And it's kind of like the little thing that pops up on your phone. I'm like, oh yeah, I'll connect with them. They don't ever connect. They're not on LinkedIn. You got to look for the people that are active on LinkedIn. And then your first person circle becomes a very hyperactive community of folks that are talking, communicating, and sharing and supporting each other on LinkedIn. And from there, that's when you're able to build to that second person kind of target ICP who may not be as active on LinkedIn, but they're going to see how active your posts are and how popular you are. So they're going to basically come into the wake and
Mhm.
basically support your LinkedIn because of how popular and viral it can become.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the commenting is a big piece because not only do you add value, and because there's so many lurkers out there anyway. So just because people don't like your comment or respond or whatever doesn't mean you're not getting people seeing that.
Yeah.
And they're like, "Oh, that's interesting. Let me go to your page. Let me look at it."
And Brian, to go back to your question, like why do some people make it and some people don't? I think you have to be interesting too, right? You can't play the middle. You can't be vanilla. Like you got to have an edge. You got to be sarcastic. You got to be funny. You got to be knowledgeable. Like that's not easy for everyone to do. But I think as soon as you can kind of let go of your ego and what you think people are thinking about you or what your friends may be saying about you, then the aha moment comes about. It's like, oh, that's my niche. That's what I'm going to own. And for me, I own sarcastic supported comments. Like I am a smart ass on LinkedIn, but I will support you to the day's end. And I
Mm.
also happen to have a really fun niche company of custom sneakers, right? That's become my little niche. Now, will my niche grow? Sure. We're going to start helping people out on LinkedIn find their voice, create their brand, and really how to stand out in this marketplace that's free, right? The fact that it's a free platform that anyone can have a voice as long as they're willing to speak into the microphone or basically type on their keyboard what their thoughts are, it's amazing. And the fact that it's not being utilized by more is insane.
Well, I think that's like anything else. You're going to get 1 or 2% of people that actually are active. And then you have a lot of these folks that maybe they'll come on every once in a while. Maybe they don't. Maybe they lurk. But, 1 to 2% of a growing platform is still a heck of a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And to your point with even the business stuff, if people are never on there, it's hard to engage with them. Who knows how they are from a business? Now, they might be wildly successful. They buy products and all this stuff. They're just not on there. And that's cool, right? You can't be everywhere. But to your point, I think if you see them engaging, you can actually learn more about them as a human. I think that helps you build that relationship a lot better.
Yeah. Yeah. And listen, you don't have to be on LinkedIn to make money, right? It just so happens that I like being on the platform and actually have a product that actually is a good solution for LinkedIn. But again, like if you're better off networking in person or doing cold calls or doing sequenced emails, go for it. This is just one other piece of the puzzle.
Just do it. Just actually do something.
You got to move.
Yeah.
You have to move.
Yeah, pick something. I wanted to, we'll kind of sidestep a little bit because I had, when I was researching for this, so I have a compass framework, and it's an acronym, and two of the words that I was thinking about that kept coming up as I looked was around commitment and accountability. That's the C in compass and the A in compass in my compass framework. And a lot of your life, because I want to go back, I don't know if we're going to have time to talk about Ironman and all that good stuff. But like, how much of it do you think your success and the things you're doing is around those two words, commitment and accountability? Can you share your thoughts? Because I know they've been so valuable to me, but I'm curious what your journey, what you think about those.
Yeah. I don't think, I think I had always been a grinder before even Ironman, right? I think Ironman ended up just being like an interesting thing when I was hungover at LSU watching I know it was. I was hungover after a football game on a Sunday, and the Hawaii Ironman came on NBC, and I just fell in love with the storyline, right? And basically going to Kona and and going across the finish line. And literally at that moment, I'm like, that's what I'm going to do. That's what I want to do. That was my like awakening moment. I'd never run. I mean, I'd run, but I haven't actually run like a marathon or done any sort of like distance running. I didn't have a bike. I didn't really swim. That became like my focus for that next year was how am I going to finish an Ironman? I wanted to feel what that story was at that finish line. And I don't know. I just fell in love with the process. And I think that kind of speaks to growth and entrepreneurship and commitment is the process, right? Because if you truly enjoy the process, whatever happens on the end is just gravy, right? If you're truly locked into the process and you enjoy the rides, the runs, the posting, the comments, and all the things that go into web development and emails and like, building out your network, then you're always going to win. And I think that comes down to, accountability to yourself, right? I mean, how accountable are you from who you are and staying committed to who you are as a person, and then also accountability to your family, right? I mean, as you get older and as you get, you get married and you have kids, like that accountability scale starts to outweigh everything, right? And then it becomes, well, I can't not, right? I can't fail. I can't not get that done because there's no other option. You have to do it. And so from a side hustle standpoint, do you stay up late and get up early? Do you work on the weekends? Hell yeah. Like all day long, all night, and all weekend until you get it done. That's the only option. So the accountability piece speaks, I think, to yourself and also to, your family who you're ultimately responsible for.
Yeah. Would you agree that this is something I think a lot because I try to do a lot of these physical pursuits. By the way, I'll take any tips. I'm going to do my first triathlon later this year. So any tips, we could talk offline too if you want. I'll be curious your perspective. But I feel like when you get there, so like let's say the Ironman, that day is actually easy
Yep.
because you've prepared for so long. Like the preparation is the hardest. When you show up, you better be ready or you're done. Right? Would you agree with that?
Yes. The day of is easy, right? Because you probably, or you should have already done that same distance at least once or twice in practice, or at least 70% of whatever your goal was before that day. And I think the day of, the key is really just sticking with what got you there, right? Don't change up the recipe the day you get to the race by messing with your nutrition, by changing up what you wear in a wetsuit, by changing up your bike. Like, you keep everything the same. And if, as long as you've stuck to the process and committed to that, you're going to finish just fine.
Did you, in terms of, again, it could be Ironman, it could be something else. Like, how do you break down? So you have that big goal. How do you think about breaking down goals into smaller chunks? Do you have any process for that?
Oh yeah. I mean, well, for an Ironman or a race, it's always basically back engineering the end result, right? It's like, okay, if I've got to finish this many miles and my goal is this time, you put your training plan together for 9 months and you start at ground zero. Like, I can run a mile and I can run it at 10 minutes. Okay, great. Well, you need to run 26 at 8 minutes. Like, how are you going to get there? And you basically backtrack and you build heavy lifting, you build heavy runs, you build sprints, you build everything into that in order to get to that final result 9 months later. So it's not easy and overnight. And I think it's the same thing with business. I mean, with Discomfort right now, we take that in phases, right? At first it was, okay, can we sell sneakers on LinkedIn? Check. We can sell a lot. Can we sell videos on LinkedIn? Check. We're selling quite a bit. Can we sell LinkedIn ad management? We'll see. We're not there yet. We don't have a client, right? We're basically talking to people, but it hasn't gotten to that point. So all this stuff is basically, I would say, you gate, almost like in a typical product development standpoint, you gate everything before you get to that next phase.
Do you guys do any like quarterly reviews, set like weekly goals? Like, I'm just kind of curious, even do you go more even deeper than that with how you plan?
We do weekly calls between Caleb and I and a couple other individuals on our team that manage different aspects of our business. I would say right now it's been more of like a listen and learn, right? I would be naive if I said, hey, I know where I'm going to take this in a year. I think I know. But for me, I'm listening to the customer and each customer that comes through to see what the true value is, right? And the true value at first was shoes, right? And the true value second was the videos. Now the true value of third is the LinkedIn ad management. So I don't know what's next, right? I know I'm going to nail down each part of those three phases. And then what comes after that is really up to the customer to kind of help me identify that journey.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's smart too. Is like there's no reason to put a fine line in the sand and then you can't move from that. I think having some pliability, I guess we'll use that since we're talking about pliability, mobility, we'll talk about that
Yeah.
as a word. But I think that's important, right? Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, you got to be fluid with your solution, right? I mean, the more pliable you can be with that solution, the better off you're going to come to. So to opportunities that allow for your clients to be extremely satisfied with what you're providing.
Hmm. One other topic, and then I'm going to kind of ask you. We'll wrap up here with something, but you've mentioned it a couple times. I'm just kind of curious your perspective about like you have a wife, you have kids. Like how like when you approach your wife and said, "Hey, by the way, I'm gonna leave this." Like I'm kind of curious that conversation, how it worked, the support, like just anything you could share. Because I think a lot of folks they're not going at it alone but maybe they're scared to talk with someone, their spouse about it. Maybe they're scared to take the leap because of the accountability that they have to, the burden. Anything you can share on that?
Yeah, it was. My wife's an incredible person, and she is very opposite of me on many things. One is worry. I am the person who worries. I'm the person who prepares. I'm the person who basically thinks about what's not going to work. She is my eternal optimist, and she understands that no matter what happens, the sun's going to come up. It's all going to be fine. And you just need to take care of yourself. And I think that was the fundamental understanding by her, was how unhappy I was at that point in my life. and she could see it. And it wasn't like I came to her and like I told her and she goes, "Oh, I didn't see this coming." Like she knew, right? She knew it was happening. Um, but for me, it's like I think for us being able to have that plan and to be able to say, okay, from 9 months from now, like here's what we're doing. And that was, I think, it made it attainable, and it also made it to where it wasn't like this big huge leap of faith. Like there was a plan in place and there was a runway in place. And for me it was a lot easier because my wife's a school teacher. We have free benefits, and so when it comes down to health benefits and all the things that are really boring and not interesting to pay for, she had that for free, which gave me a leg up in the entrepreneurial world to actually go out on my own with kids.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's something is recognizing your situation, because this goes back to even like LinkedIn or other platforms. You see other people and you're like, oh man, like they're doing this, that, and the other. But it's like, okay, you got to understand, you don't know their perspective. You don't know what they're going through or what they have maybe as a someone maybe paying the bills at home, or you don't know any of that. So again, only focus on your situation and figure out what you want. And then I think work as a team, as you said, is so important. I mean, gosh, so important to have those conversations.
Well, even Brian, like I remember like probably my first Monday when I was working for myself, I'm like, it wasn't like, yes, I made it. It was like, oh shit. Like
Yeah.
it's me. Like I just made a big bet on myself, but there is nothing better to fuel you at hustle than to know that you're out there by yourself. Like you will hustle like nothing else. That is the fuel.
Yeah. I mean, it's either you swim or drown. I mean, it's that simple. I
Yeah.
mean, you can't tread water for that long.
No. And I think I probably gave myself, I want to say a solid 5 months to figure it
Yeah.
out. But again, it's like, and I also knew, and I'm sorry to get off point here, but I also knew like it didn't have to be final, right? I didn't say, hey, I'm never going to get a job again. I'm going to do this, and this is the only thing I'm going to be able to do. I'm unhireable. I'll never be able to get a job again. Once you get out and you actually start creating your own business, you learn so much that becomes such a value prop if you do decide to go back and get a job. If you do
Yeah.
decide to go back into sales or marketing or engineering, whatever it is, the ability to say, hey, I did this, whether it failed or whether it succeeded beyond your wildest dreams, you can go back and say, this is what I learned. And you are going to be able to get a job because you've done it on your own. It's,
Yeah.
it's a major unlock that I wish more people understood, because I think it actually gives you a better sense of creative freedom when it comes to work, and also a better sense of pride, right? And who you are as a person, to know like you're not going into a job interview needing it, right? They need you because now you are bringing this back part of your experience into that position that's going to be invaluable.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think that we got to underscore that for a second, because you're actually, I believe this is, by the way, this was something really hard for me to get over, to think about, of like, oh yeah, it's like that identity thing, getting back to going back to like a job. But then I realized like the employability factor, like you just mentioned, is higher because you have all these skills, but actually I think you also have an idea of maybe what you like more, what you want to do. And if you've built a network properly, you have dozens upon dozens of people to reach out and be like, dude, I'm not going to do this on my own anymore, but I love what you're doing.
Yep.
You have any roles? And that's where I think you ultimately maybe find a really good landing spot.
Exactly. And it's, I've always broken it down to a couple of things. There's like a solopreneur, a
Mhm.
partnerpreneur, and an entrepreneur, right? And I think everyone's got their own little preneurship that they're into. And entrepreneur is just as good as anything else, as long as the business gives you freedom to create your own business unit and gives you the freedom to kind of create and really experiment with different ways to build their business. There's a lot of value in being an entrepreneur in an existing business. For me, being a solopreneur, I don't like it. I like working with people. So I've always been a partnerpreneur, which I've always had a partner that kind of rides with me in that journey. And they typically have a different set of skills that I couldn't even touch. And I've got a different set of skills that they don't have. And that's where
Mhm.
I've always found that it's been the best. I would say success rate for me is understanding, are you solo, are you partner, or are you entrepreneur? And that kind of unlocks some opportunities for people.
That's a great exercise for folks to think about. So on that note, let's finish up with this. I always like to ask folks. I mean, you could give advice. I used to do that a lot, in the years past. But I'd like to actually take an action item. So, is there something, maybe whether it's a question for people to ponder, whether it's a challenge, maybe something for them to do? What would be something to have them just get started today that you would encourage them to go after?
A couple of things. One is, I think for me, that's worked for me over and over again, that I think will work for others, is you have to say it, right? If you want to do it and you want to start a side hustle or you want to go out on your own, you need to tell people around you that are going to keep you accountable, right? And then that becomes that little push that you're like, I can't let these people down. I don't want to fail. I don't want to not do it. It gives that extra push for you to actually do it. The second part of that is just move, right? Do not stay stagnant, right? As much as it hurts to basically go on LegalZoom and form an LLC, go on GoDaddy and start your website, to set up your CRM, to come up with your product, just start moving and things come in place. And you don't have to have something 100% baked in order to have a business. You literally do not. And if you can get something 70% baked, you've got a business. Now you've got to get people to buy into your business and create revenue. And then you actually can get there. But it's people get stalled out before they even take their first step. And I always tell everyone, just start moving. Get yourself to where you've taken that first step of commitment, right? Vocalize it, and then form your LLC, and then get your website, get everything going. And then you're locked in. Then you're like, 2 months later, you're like, whoa, I'm in business.
Yeah. Yeah. I think those are two great things, right? Speak it out to the world and then take some action on it.
Yeah.
No better time than today. So, Matt, that's a lot of fun, man. Where can people say, well, LinkedIn probably is where they could say hello to you best online, but I'll let you give the spots.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You can obviously connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm highly engaged on LinkedIn. And then you can check out our website, discomfort.org, DSCMFRT.org, no vowels. And you can obviously send me an email at matt@discomfort.org at any moment. And yeah, that's it, man. Thanks for having me.